UDL in Action podcast wishes to acknowledge First Nations peoples in Australia and across the world whose songlines traverse the globe. We pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging whose cultural traditions inspire and continue to educate.
Welcome to the UDL in Action podcast, the podcast where we make research practical. In this series, we dive into the framework of UDL and will explore each guideline directed by questions from an early career teacher. Today's episode is all about support, specifically how to realistically apply Guideline 8 from the CAST UDL framework. We're focusing on design options for sustaining effort and persistence. If you've ever wondered how to keep students motivated without burning yourself out, this episode is for you. I'm your host, Rebecca Rosenberg. As always, I'm joined by my talented co-host, Rhonda Laswell from Indiana, a retired educator and Universal Design for Learning coordinator. She spent nearly 2 decades immersed in UDL as both a teacher and a professional development coach for educators. Rhonda shares her expertise in every episode by giving us her insight and hands-on experience built over decades. Rhonda, welcome back.
Hi, it's so good to be here as always. Thank you.
Lovely. So to get us underway, we have Zach joining us. Zach is an early career teacher who is currently working in a regional high school in Queensland. Zach is keen to learn more about UDL, and we are keen for all educators to understand UDL and how to utilize it. Zach is going to guide our conversation with his questions throughout this series. Zach's question for this episode is:
As an early career teacher, how can I realistically apply Guideline 8 in ways that are manageable, time efficient, and sustainable in my everyday practice? Can you please give some practical examples of each of the considerations, particularly meaningful goals and action-oriented feedback?
Well, Rhonda, as we have discussed before, UDL isn't about doing more work. It's about doing the right work to support every learner. If Guideline 8 is about designing learning environments where effort makes sense and persistence feels possible, how would you approach this as an early career teacher?
Okay, I always love his questions. So one resource that you can utilize in addition to just actually having the guidelines and sitting down and thinking about them, that I like to do once we get to this, what we call the second row, or where we have support. So kind of think of it this way. The top row of the guidelines access would be like a parent having a bike and having the child seat on the back and the kids riding along, right? The teacher's really in control of that. So then the second row is more like, okay, we've got training wheels on, right? We're not riding the bike by ourselves, but we need your support because we're learning skills that help us be expert learners. And then finally, we would get down to where we're actually beginning to ride the bike and go places on our own. So I would start there with that analogy because that kind of frames that second level. So they're still needing quite a bit of support from you, and they're needing to be taught the strategies, especially the strategies of studentness and the strategies that go with learning. Now, that being said, it's always also great to get with and collaborate with your any special ed education staff you have in the building as well, because a lot of the things that they may do if they pull kids out as far as strategies and activities, you can just incorporate and push right into your classroom out of the gate as part of either a station rotation or an option for students. So I would start there with that. Then when we're looking specifically at clarifying the meaning and purpose of the goals, I always tell people that you want to make sure that you explain and understand the why, and that students have access to the why. So you will have your standard, right? Your content standard or your skill-based standard, and that's your goal. So you write that in student-friendly language. But then from there, you want to think about how to deconstruct that goal and turn it into a why. Why do I need to? Why should I be able to? So, why do I need to know this, or why should I be able to do this, whether it's a content or a skill standard? And that's always really important. The other thing that you can do there as well that doesn't take any extra time at all is to have them rewrite the goal and the why in their own words, because you can very quickly walk around and see if they even understand completely what that is. So that's a super, super easy thing to do. As far as offering action-oriented feedback, the only way that you can really do that that's going to be super effective and efficient in a classroom is a classroom that is really a learning culture. And what I mean by that is, having students be able to work independently with a partner and then small groups is really important in that kind of learning community, because that frees you up to move about the building, right? So I would always say, you're free to move about the plane now, right? Because once you're up in the air. So in the classroom, it's the same thing. You want to get students to a place where they're free to move about the cabin and do what they need to do as far as learning goes. So that requires social norms, right? That it requires expectations, but that also requires practicing, right? Practicing doing fishbowl conversations and practicing having them work together. And sometimes the best way to do that is not around the actual content, around something that's more interesting to them. So at the beginning of the school year, having them talk about maybe their favorite music artist and share 3 of their favorite facts in a small group takes the cognitive load off, the pressure off. They're practicing the skill, but it's about something they feel comfortable with. So that's another easy thing to do. Plus, they think you're really cool because you're asking them questions about something they would love to talk about. But you can also put that on a cube and have them roll it in a small group, and it comes up and says, "Tell me about your favorite food. Tell me about your, favorite hobby." So it doesn't always have to be a scripted one either. You can leave a little bit of chance to that. But as far as mastery oriented or action oriented feedback, sticky notes are a great way to do that. As you're walking around and you're looking at work or you're answering questions, writing a note to someone or explaining something to them or giving them that feedback and then jotting it on a note so that they have it is really, really, really helpful as well. I also like to have an opportunity for there to be some sort of guided process in the learning. So especially for some kiddos, dividing or chunking up the class period is really valuable. And when you do that, then you can just leave a small section at each interchange between those, and usually 10 to 15 minutes between, large group, small group activity. Then if you do need to give somebody some very specific feedback, you can put it right there in line with where you're at in the agenda for the day. But I feel like action-oriented feedback is something that gives an individual the opportunity to think and then redirect or make a change, or even giving them the option to edit something. So a lot of times we think action-oriented feedback is just something in the learning process, but action-oriented feedback could very easily simply be we've taken a quiz or we've had an assessment, and now what I would like you to do is go through and take my notes that I've given back to you, and I want you to find the correct answer. I want you to learn what you maybe missed on 4 and 7. And that way we're not just, oh, here's your paper, this is your grade, and we're moving on to the next thing, and I'm getting left with gaps, right? Because that's what happens. We get left with gaps, and then we wonder why 8 months down the road we've got these problems, right? So we've left these gaps. So for me, action-oriented feedback is also very much tread, on the road. I am working through the process of figuring out and learning from my mistake and maybe my miscalculation versus it's just this punitive grade. Great. Now going into the next unit, I'm at a C instead of a B now. I really want students to be able to see the process of learning as valuable. And that only happens when we attend to the process of learning. And so both clarifying the meaning and telling the why, and then giving that action-oriented feedback, both in line with learning, but also after some sort of assessment, whether it's formative or summative, either one really gives a student an opportunity. And that's also a time when you can say, okay, everybody, I noticed we had several people struggle with number 7. I'm going to do a little mini lesson and we're going to talk about 7 again. Anybody who wants to come over here for that little conference does that. And then everybody else is working on fixing or working on what they need to be addressing, right? It doesn't have to take a whole class period. It can just be a 15 or 20-minute thing. But you're teaching them how to grow and learn from versus just, oh, gotta see.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's like you're going from that superficial tick and flick responses to that deep knowledge and understanding because you've been provided with feedback. Do you take the time to Do you provide the time for students to ask you questions in response to the feedback, as well as even ask a peer their thoughts about some things that they're not quite sure about within that 15-minute period that you within the lesson that you're really grappling, allowing students to grapple with the feedback that you've provided?
Absolutely, and both. It could be both. So you may have some students, and this is another opportunity for you to utilize the collective brain, right? You're really drawing on that, your social capital. And so you may have a student who really rocks something, and you're like, okay, Teddy over here would be a great person if you want to take 5 minutes and go over and chat with him about number 2. He would be a great person to consult with about that. That lets that person shine too. Now, you may have students who don't feel comfortable doing that. They'd rather wait for you to come by. But by allowing the culture to be of collaboration and, learning, and when you've set up those social norms, that functions and hums in a way that allows you then to get out there, right? And to have the opportunity to meander through the room and get to where you need to get, right? To address those things. So I would say both. I mean, if you've got students who are willing and interested in that, that's also a great opportunity for you to say even something to them at some point, especially at the secondary level. I think you'd make a really good teacher, because that's one of the areas, in the States here, I know we struggle with having enough educators. And I don't understand why we're not spending more time at the secondary really pumping our students up for the real, I guess it's really a privilege to be an educator. It's not oh, well, you couldn't do anything else, so you're teaching, right? No, it's a privilege. And I think we need to work on what people think about educators every chance we get. We need to talk them up every chance we get. We need to praise them every chance we get, because that's a real, that's a real public service. And why wouldn't we be utilizing that whole base of students, right? And seeing who we could tap on the shoulder to possibly have interest in that as a line of work. And they might not have even ever thought about it. And then giving them the chance to do that, to even engage in that way with other students, might spark something for them. So I say yes and both.
I agree with teaching. I'm the same. I think being a teacher is a privileged role without a doubt. And I think by providing that opportunity for students to connect with one another in regards to feedback they're receiving, not only builds confidence and connection and collaboration with same-aged peers, but it also encourages our young people to acknowledge the importance of asking questions and to keep asking when we're unsure, because we can get into this mindset that, oh, it makes me look stupid and I don't want to look stupid, as opposed to this is really progressive. This is going to increase my knowledge, and it's no question is ever a silly or a stupid question, because without a doubt there are other people in the room, let alone outside of the classroom, that have similar similar questions and similar queries. So I think that strategy and providing active feedback, not only from you, but from peers, is really proactive, and not only
Yeah.
in the classroom, but beyond the classroom as well.
Absolutely. And at the beginning of the school year, you have to sometimes teach some skills. And sometimes at the beginning of the school year, if you have a learning management system, you may have to allow some students to do that via instant messaging through the system with you or through the platform that you have, just to begin to build their confidence in being able to ask those questions. Because sometimes we have students who just for whatever reason, school's not been fun, it's not been enjoyable, it's not been, charging them up and energizing them. It's actually something that they may very much dread. And so when they see that learning is a process and not a destination, it's not a fill in the blank. It's not a fill in the blank. That's not why we're here. But we've treated it that way for so long, right? Scantron, fill in the blank, multiple choice. And so I think we have created that, and now we have to dismantle that.
So Guideline 8 really is about teaching someone how to ride a bike, but providing them with the training wheels to be able to do that independently and with agency. I really enjoyed listening to that analogy, and that will stay with me always, Rhonda. I also very much, just to reiterate, the importance of stating that goal and the why to students. So there's clarity around the purpose of the lesson and what the practical application is of that, in not only in the classroom but beyond the classroom as well. And these we talk about life skills, but these are skills that are going to be beneficial both now and in the future. And we only continue to develop our skill and knowledge and heart for learning, the more we have that positive and that encouraging feedback that enables us to be able to build on those learning blocks. And it never stops. We never stop learning, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a gift, really, isn't it?
Yes, and it's okay for, different individuals in the learning environment to have different whys too. You can say, hey, based on this goal, what's your why? Why would you want to know this? Why would you want to be able to do this? And when you hear student voice give you some of those, you may have a kiddo who, they'll buy into a peer's why way more than they buy into an adult's why, right? And so again, it doesn't take any extra time. It's just about creating that learning culture where you're bringing them into the process of learning. You're basically selling it, right? You're selling learning.
And how can you not be drawn in or brought in to what you're learning when you're providing a classroom context such as and a learning environment such as the one you've described?
And
That's
it's
great.
not only more fun for the student, it is way more fun for the educator. Let me tell you, class periods fly by in that environment, right?
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. So you don't need to master UDL to start using it. If you're reflecting on barriers, offering choices, and designing with learners in mind, you're already on the right path. UDL isn't about doing more. It's about designing smarter with intention and empathy, which is what we've discussed today. Rhonda, thank you once again for your insight and practical expertise. Before we wrap up, what's one takeaway you'd love our listeners to walk away with today?
Well, I think this is one for the educator and for the students, and that is UDL is a process, not a destination. Learning is a process, not a destination.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for tuning in. If today's episode sparked ideas or reflections, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at udl.in guideline.action.podcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like the show notes or resources mentioned, just click on the link at the end of each episode description to our G Drive folder for listeners. And please share our podcast with your colleagues through YouTube or Spotify. Until next time, keep designing for possibility, not predictability. We'll see you later for now.
Toodaloo.